Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the 2022 Cuyahoga County Literacy Dashboard. I want to thank you all for being here this morning on this blustery, little bit of a chilly morning. Special thanks to Cuyahoga Community College and our board member Janice Marshall for providing this wonderful space for this event so we can gather in person. Isn't that wonderful, to gather in person? I've had the opportunity to meet or re-meet several people who I've only had an opportunity to talk to online, and so it's great to see people in person and faces. Special thanks, we have some elected officials here in the audience. Thank you, Merle Johnson with the State School Board. Thank you. Richard Starr with Cleveland City Council, Ward 5. Thank you. And representing Mayor Bibb's office, Sonia Pryor-Jones. Awesome. Thank you for being here. Well, we have a wonderful agenda and speakers here for you today, so we're going to get right into it. But before we get started, I have a few announcements to make. There's still 2 weeks left to put in a nomination for the Kurt Carrickle Literacy Award. The Third Federal Foundation established an award in the name of Kurt Carrickle, who was retiring at the time, the president of Third Federal Foundation, to recognize an organization that is doing exemplary work to advance literacy in our community. Earlier this year, we had the first awardee, and it was Seeds of Literacy, who won a $20,000 cash prize. For you nonprofits out there that are always looking for dollars, this is about the easiest nomination process you will ever see. It's a 2-page nomination. If you know an organization that you think has been promoting literacy, please nominate them. I see we have Meredith Turner, who is here from Cleveland, or Cuyahoga County Council. Thank you. So 2 weeks left for the Kurt Carrickle Literacy Award. The winning organization will be recognized at our Read Across America event next spring. Our question and answer format for today will be, there's cards on your table. Please write your question on the card and just put it up. And one of our staff members, Joan or Mackenzie, will come around and grab those cards, and we'll have time at the end to address as many of those as possible. Of course, like every other event, after today's session, we'll be sending out a survey. Please take a moment to fill that out. It really helps us identify what we can do to help make this session more meaningful for all of you. And lastly, a special thank you to the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation, whose support make events like this very possible. You'll see our agenda here today. As I mentioned, we have several people that we're excited to have with us. Laureen Atkins-Holliday is our Vice President of Strategic Initiatives with the Literacy Cooperative. Alex Dorman, a research associate with the Center for Community Solutions, who's been very helpful in helping us not only find some of the data that we're going to be sharing with you today, but presenting it as well. Donald Jolly II, Superintendent of Warrensville City School District, who's going to talk a little bit about the perspective on the ground and in the field, especially in the K-3 space, of the effects of the pandemic and how we're coming out of that pandemic and how we can come out even stronger. And Bishara Addison, Director of Job Preparation for the Fund for Economic Future, again, looking at the impact of the pandemic on workers, people looking for work, and employers looking for workers. So we're excited. You could see the agenda. Several people, we're going to be tag teaming, we'll be jumping up and down. Just a little bit on the Literacy Cooperative, what we do: convene and inform sessions like this, bringing the community together, talk about literacy and some of the statistics around literacy and the challenges. Champion awareness, make people aware of, while we have challenges in literacy, it really presents an opportunity. There are opportunities here that we need to take advantage of. And identify those strategies which can make those pathways to literacy, increased education, and employment available. Our priority areas are around early childhood literacy, and we really look at that footprint as birth through age 5, at kindergarten readiness time. Parent engagement, because we know we're not going to help those children reach their highest potential if we don't think about the adult in their life and their parents. Adult literacy, and we look at that through the lens of career pathways, how to help those adults connect to those occupational skill training programs that could lead them to better employment opportunities. And really what it's all about is family, the whole family approach, 2Gen. how do we begin looking at a family as a single service unit as opposed to a series of several individual service units? Because we need to consider the needs of that entire family. What our goals are to clearly convey the costs and the consequences of the status quo. What can we do differently? What do we need to do differently? How do we address this issue together? Highlight some of the strategies and programs in our community that are effective. Informing the agencies that are providing the literacy service. There's some of the research that we do share with those organizations. Strengthen public policies and increase funder support. This literacy dashboard, this is the 4th dashboard that we've convened. We started in 2019. And what we really looked at a couple data points that are consistent with our areas of focus, early literacy and adult literacy. So the 2 main data points that we will look at are kindergarten readiness assessment. Are children prepared when they're beginning kindergarten? And as we know today, there are far too many children who are beginning kindergarten who are not fully prepared to begin kindergarten. And the challenge becomes how do they catch up in a few short years, because we know the importance of reading at grade level by 3rd grade. So a child who starts behind has a short period of time to catch up. And the unfortunate reality is those that start behind often stay behind. In the adult side, what we're going to be looking at is the number of adults without a high school equivalency. Because we know those numbers don't change significantly year to year, we've identified other leading indicators that we will report on year to year and have, and that is for children, the number of children enrolled in high-quality preschool and the number of children enrolled in the Dolly Parton Imagination Library program. And for adults, we'll be looking at the number enrolled in certified Aspire programs and the number of high school equivalencies that students are getting through the Aspire programs. So let me first begin with the children, and for my part of the presentation, it'll be for birth to age 5. You might remember last year at this event, the majority of the event was focused around this early childhood, and we had Dr. Megan Salas Atwell from Case Western Reserve, who shared a little bit about the analysis that Case Western did on kindergarten readiness and the relationship with Imagination Library enrollment. And what she found was that there was a positive relationship between children who participated in Imagination Library and kindergarten readiness. So this year we're going to spend a little more time on the effects of the pandemic on K through 3 children and the adult side of our data. So quality preschool enrollment, the good news, it's up significantly from last year, 54%. Of course, the pandemic had a drastic effect on not only the number of seats available, but the number of children who were enrolled. The good news is we're not far off the pace from the pre-pandemic. We're only less than 7%, about 6.7% below where we were before the pandemic. So the good news is we've got a very, very strong pre-K group of organizations in our community that continue to strengthen the policies and get the information out to families. Pre for CLE, Starting Point, Invest in Children are wonderful partners to have in this community to really help focus the attention on the need for quality preschool. On Imagination Library, we see the number of children served has continued to rise each year. There's a 15% increase from 2021. We have over 42,000 children were served this year. As far as the number of books that were mailed, over 400,000 books were mailed to Cuyahoga County children in 2022. In fact, in this summer, we surpassed 1 million books. 1 million books, high quality, age appropriate, brand new books were mailed to Cuyahoga County children since inception. I'm going to go over a couple points in the survey we just conducted. We conduct a survey every year, and you'll see that there are 2 pie charts. One would be the overall responses, and the other one is the responses from high poverty zip codes in Cuyahoga County. And those high poverty zip codes where 25% of the people in those zip codes are below the poverty line. And to give you some context, a family of 4 would be about $27,000 a year for a family of 4. So in these highlighted zip codes, poverty is more than 25%. So we ask a lot of questions in our survey, but a couple that always jump out to me are, since you've been receiving books, is your child asking you to read more? Since you've been receiving the books, and you'll see the overall response, 61% say yes. In the high poverty zip codes, 76% of respondents are saying, my child is asking to read more with me now that they're getting these books. Over and over, parents will tell us how excited the child is when that book comes in the mail. You know, the book comes with the child's name on it. And what parents will tell us is that day that book comes, they want to read it, and they want to read it, they want to read it. So maybe as good or better than children wanting to read, families are reading more together. Overall, 72% of families said they are reading more together now since they've been getting the books. In the high poverty zip codes, 83%. 83% of families are saying we're reading more now. Of course, that child's excited, they want to read, they're reading with the child. So it's not surprising that the results of the Case Western Reserve study last year, if families are reading more together, children are being exposed to words, to print, to concepts, they're going to be better prepared for kindergarten. You know, we asked this question, do you believe Imagination Library is helping your child better prepare for kindergarten? Again, overwhelmingly, 88% and overall 91%. And it was interesting, one of the first times I shared this with somebody, they said, you know, Bob, most people probably don't know what you need to really be prepared for kindergarten. And while that may be true, imagine the confidence level that that child is going to have if their parent believes they're ready. They believe they're ready to start. That confidence is going to be carried over to that child when they're starting kindergarten. And I think it's not by accident that the very first book every child will get in the Imagination Library program is The Little Engine That Could, right? What is that book? What is that book about? It's about grit and determination. There are people writing books about grit and determination. It's about you can do anything if you put your mind to it. I love this one. What percent of books in your home are made up of Imagination Library books? And you can see here in the higher poverty zip codes, 28% of the respondents said Imagination Library books make up all or nearly all the books in their home library. And if you look at the 2, the 3, and the 4, 75%, almost half of the respondents said Imagination Library books make up at least 75% of the books in their home. This remains, in my opinion, the best way to get books into the homes of families. Whoop, went too fast. Lastly, how did you learn about Imagination Library? Well, in the overall respondents, from a friend, which is great. It affirms the value. If you're telling your friends about it, you must believe it's a good thing. In the high poverty zip codes, they're learning about it mostly at a doctor's office. So thanks to our medical partners. Thank you to Reach Out and Read. Lynn Ferran is the executive director of Reach Out and Read for getting information out to the pediatricians that are sharing not only the great work that Reach Out and Read does, but they're sharing information about Imagination Library and how to enroll and sign up. So that is it on my part of the children portion here. Oh, not advancing. But I want to ask Alex Dorman from the Center for Community Solutions to come up and do his thing. Thank you.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Dorman. I'm a research associate with the Center for Community Solutions, and please bear with me while we work through some graphs together. So I'm going to just talk a little bit today about the updated literacy cycle. This is something I'm sure you're all familiar with and you've seen before. This is something the Literacy Cooperative updates somewhat regularly. And we wanted just to take a moment to work through the cycle with the newest 2021-2022 data. So what we can see here in this upper right quadrant, starting with the youngest members on this cycle, the kindergartners, is that unfortunately a little over half of kindergartners in Cuyahoga County are not assessed as being on track to read at grade level. And of course, this feeds into the third grade reading level, which statewide shows that about 40% of third graders in the state of Ohio are not considered proficient in reading. This all factors into high school graduation rates, where we can see in Cuyahoga County about 13% of high school students in the county failed to graduate within 4 years. And all of this wrapped together can feed into the adult literacy rate in Cuyahoga County, which shows that about 54% of adults in Cuyahoga County are not at the highest proficiency when it comes to reading. But what we thought was important, instead of just showing this data to you, is being able to compare it to what these numbers looked like in 2019, before the pandemic. And I don't need to tell anyone in this room just how difficult the pandemic has been on education and schooling in general, but we still thought it was meaningful to compare what this cycle looked like back in 2019 to what it looks like today. So I'm going to do that going through each of these different categories here. So getting started, looking at kindergarten readiness, unfortunately, the percentage of kindergartners who were assessed as not on track increased from 42% in 2018-19 to 55% in 2021 and 2022. Third grade reading at the state level decreased about 6 percentage points, going from 66% of third graders who are assessed as being proficient in reading to about 60% of third graders who are assessed as being proficient in reading. However, I will say, fortunately, high school graduation rates from pre-pandemic to now are almost identical. Obviously, we would love to see this number be 100%. We would want all students in Cuyahoga County to be graduating. But where it stands now, our numbers are looking almost exactly as they were pre-pandemic. So this was just a little teaser. Sorry to come up here and give you the boring stuff with the numbers. I promise I'll be back and try to be a little more exciting. But I'm going to pass it on to the next, our next presenter.
Good morning. Morning. It's an honor to be here today. I'd like to recognize two people who have done a lot of work with me over the last 8 years. Our board president of Warrensville Heights City Schools, Tracy Mitchell, if she could raise her hand, please. And our board member, Ray Freeman, also. So they're both here at Warrensville. So it's an honor to be here today. My name is Donald Jolly. I have the honor to serve as the superintendent of Warrensville Heights City School District. Warrensville is located on the southeast side of Cleveland. Many of you know. Probably have 1,850 students, and we are 99% African American. When I took over the school district, the district was on the verge of a state takeover. We were rated 612 in the state, and on the last report card, we were rated 298. So we've done a lot of work in Warrensville. So today, I just want to tell a story of just some work that's been done and a real keen focus on literacy. One of the things that we understand and know that, and it was said earlier, that kids that start behind, stay behind. And understanding that if we don't get our young scholars to read early, to be critical thinkers, to understand and be able to comprehend and understand what they read, and to think critically, they're going to be stuck. We understand that and know they'll be stuck. And growing up in the community and knowing and seeing, we see the effects of people who can't read. We see the effects of the lack of mobility. We see the effects of job opportunities and so forth. So our district has made a tremendous commitment. We'll just talk a little bit about it today. I'll go over some numbers and just share some strategies that we use. But beginning, when I came, we only had 21% of our third graders who were proficient. We saw some numbers, 40% in the state. We were well below that. That attributed to the concerns about the state takeover. It was two school districts got took over, which was Youngstown and Lorain. And Warrensville was on the list, and also Maple was on the way on the list. So we had a lot of work initially to get going to try to really focus and refocus everyone on the most important thing in schools, which is students. Kids are the most important things. A lot of times in education, we get union concerns, we get adult concerns, but our focus has really been on our students and getting everybody to buy into a one team, one vision, one goal mindset. So this is just a historical thing. When we came in 21, we had, in 15, we had only 21% passing. By the pandemic, we were up to 68% of our third graders were passing. We had done a complete turnaround. 79% were below basic. That year before the pandemic, we only had 32% of our students below basic. So our process, we did change some configurations of schools. We did a lot of different things to ensure, but the instructional focus, which I'll go over in the next few slides, will share the story of how this happened. We also work closely with the library. I see representative of the Cleveland Library who worked real close with us doing summer boot camps at the library for our pre-kindergartners coming in, after school programs and so forth. So one of the three important things we did was we received the Striving Readers Grant. And this was a grant in collaboration with other school districts. We really focused on the science of reading. All our teachers were trained in this. We developed a local district literacy plan, which every subject, everything was focused on literacy. And we looked at how we instruct literacy, how much time is allocated for literacy, what goes on each block in literacy. And these things attributed to a lot of our success. The Strivers Readers Grant was done through the ESC, which provided intensive support for our teachers. All of our K-3 teachers participated in it, which gave them a lens of understanding how to teach literacy. So each day in our K-3, we have literacy blocks in which the components of reading are broke up each day. So we use 120 minutes a day. Our curriculum, everything is aligned to literacy. We know where students are. We know exactly what standards students need to know, and then we have to do something about it. We ask 3 questions. These are 3 questions in Warrensville. What do students need to know? How do we know if they know it? And if they don't know it, what we're going to do about it? And if they do know it, how are we going to accelerate them to the next level? So using this block and this concept, we are able to identify weaknesses and strengths of all our students. Our goal also, and this is something, because everyone has to have a goal to work on. A lot of times in schools, there's no goals. A lot of blaming goes on kids too. We have to increase 7% in every subject every year. Every subject we have to increase. That keeps the goal in mind every single day. No blame, we can't blame anybody. It's the team. The team has to get this 7%. So creating a district goal, and when we say one team, this is how we all strive to improve this 7%. And in our district improvement plan, we have 2 strategies. First strategies are tier 2 and 3 strategies, in which we look at each student as an individual. There's moderate support or intervention, which is our strategy 1. And then our strategy 2 is when that's all students. So that's what we teach all students. So our original curriculum is when we teach all the students the standards. And then tier 2 and tier 3 as we break the students out based on their individual needs. Accountability is important in this process. So we know what adults need to do. Of course, if you don't inspect what you expect, it doesn't happen. So we have our adult indicators. What are our adults supposed to do? Again, it goes back to how do we know if students are learning or not? So the process, we use a cadence, we use STAR scores, we use Ohio State tests, we use iReady. And then it goes back to what happens. So those are the action steps that we do. So we administrate these screeners, we have progress monitor, and then we make shifts if something's not working. If the data informs us that our teachers are not teaching this standard right, then we got to make adjustments. So we have to inspect what we expect. So we do test our students on a biweekly basis, and we use that information either to adjust our curriculum, we use it to provide intense intervention, we use it next year to change the scope and sequence to ensure that whatever our kids are missing, that we're able to provide. And then our second one, again, this is just monitoring what we teach everybody. So again, we have instructional walkthroughs where we have teams who go into the schools to ensure that we see proper learning. We see that our teachers are equipped and ready. And we use that data, again, to provide support for our staff. There's no perfect teacher, there's no perfect administrator. Everybody needs professional development. And we use this to drive our professional development and where we go next. So we improved the scores 50%, and then the pandemic hit. So again, when you work under a lot of stress and pressure of the state takeover, you cannot go backwards, because we understood that if we didn't continue our growth, there was a potential that our schools could be taken over. So during the pandemic, we were very, very intentional in making sure our kids, we got them back in school as soon as possible, but we had structured intervention to bring them back. So we implemented something called Operation Catch Up. And this is in the middle of the pandemic to bring our kids back, to ensure they were here. So every school, during the initial pandemic, we brought back our kindergartners and first graders. This was in August of 2020. During the different periods of time when there were flares up of COVID, we had to shut down and so forth. But we brought everybody back on January 25th. But when we brought them back in January 25th of 2021, we wanted to ensure that there was a plan to catch students up. We did not want to go back to business as usual, because business as usual would have cost us 2 years of instruction, because those 18 months that we were out were very detrimental. So we screened the students as soon as they came back, and then we created flexible groups throughout the school. So it wasn't like you were in third grade and you were in this group. You were placed based upon your needs. So you were tested, and then the groups shifted throughout the day. We did not hold our schools to a regular schedule. They had the autonomy to do whatever they needed with the schedule to make sure things happened. We used our money that we received to hire additional teachers. That was very, very important, because our classroom teachers cannot provide the intervention to 25 kids. So we hired 11 additional. We're really small, so we don't have a big group. 11 teachers did the job for us. And we were able to provide small group instruction for our students, to do pull-outs, to do push-ins, whatever met the needs of our students. We hired a very important position, because our principals have a hard job, especially with COVID, with all the moving parts that were going with that. We hired a position called the Director of Scholar Intervention. And this person's primary job is to ensure that our interventions are running, that they're being monitored, and that they're working. So that's her whole job every single day. We hired math and instructional coaches in our middle and high school to make sure, because you got to think about it, a 7th grader was in 5th grade when the pandemic started. Our 9th graders were in 7th grade when the pandemic started. And then we threw them into a high school based upon 7th grade. The level of engagement during the pandemic was based on each family. Some families were very engaged and some didn't do anything. And as a district, how could we fail kids in a situation they had no control over? So we had to make sure that we provided our students with the support that they needed to make sure, to make sure they were ready and flourishing and ready to go. So this is an example of some of our intervention plans, and it went from kindergarten to 1st grade, and almost every minute of the day was accounted for. And then one of the things we did is extended school year. So we extended our school year last year 30 days. In that extended school year, again, school never stopped. School was supposed to end on May 26th. We went to June 30th. Over 80% of our students participated in it because our parents saw the need. And I also just like to recognize our union, because our union was very, very supportive, because they understood the value, they understood why we needed to do this work. So where we are now, moving forward, So we have 3 initiatives now. We've trained all of our teachers in letters training. Letters training is the science, basically the science of reading. So all our K-3 teachers have been trained in this pedagogy of ensuring that instruction literacy is the forefront. So in the science of reading, I'll go back over that in a later slide. It'll go through the process that we do to teach reading. Explicit instruction is ensuring that we understand and know exactly where students are. It's direct and engaging instruction. We trained all our teachers in that because we have to make sure that they're focused on what these standards are and they have engaging strategies to ensure that they're successful. And then I talked about it, but our multi-tier system of support, again, looking at every student. Basically, every student has their own individualized education plan, not just for special needs students, but our regular students, because every student is different. And one of the things that our district didn't do a good job of is accelerating our students who are at grade level or higher. Oftentimes, those students are bored in school because school just basically teaches to the middle. So we could not continue to, and I'll tell you this too, when you have charter schools and other people competing for your best students, you cannot teach to the middle because all students want to be challenged. And with our system, we have challenging and engaging curriculum for our students who are already at grade level or master grade level. And coming out of the pandemic, that difference was vast because, again, the level of engagement at home told the story. Some kids who were at grade level didn't do anything during the pandemic, and they were below grade level. But some kids, parents had them doing everything during the pandemic. So we couldn't leave them behind. So we had to work on that also. So letters, and this is the letters training, the ESC does this, but we trained our K-1 teachers, 100% of them. But this is very important because it helps our teachers understand the science of reading. I went to school a long time ago, and I was a kindergarten trained teacher. We didn't learn the science of reading. We learned basically how to do the vowel sounds and how to help kids put the consonants together. But this teaches the brain, the science in the brain of how to teach students to learn, how the verbs and the syllables and everything is connected. And I think it's helped our teachers because it's just not the vowels and synonyms and things, but it's the actual science of it. So with 100% of our K-1 teachers learning that, it's been very beneficial for us. And again, it goes to the science of reading, understanding the 3 different components of reading, using these different tools, Heggerty and foundations on a daily basis. We are assuring that when our kids get to 3rd grade that they're ready. And then explicit instruction, again, we send our teachers to the training, and we continue to train our students, our teachers in this, and this is our process of ensuring support. And then again, one of the things I do want to highlight, at our elementary school, we have a session every day called No New Instruction. This is our intervention block. So based on the data, this is when all our flexible groups occur. Kids move, a 2nd grader who is on the 3rd grade level can go to the 3rd grade class to get instruction during that block. Because again, we want to ensure that wherever kids are, that their needs are met. So at our elementary school, we have this No New Instruction. Welcome anybody to come see it. You'll be very pleased to see the work that our teachers do and our principals do. And also we track everything through a system called Branch Your Minds. So Branch Your Minds is a data warehouse where we track discipline data, we track instructional data, and we have to keep a pulse on exactly where the students are. It's not in the spreadsheet. You can go to this website, type in Donald Jolly, you can see the discipline, you can see where I'm at in reading, you can see where I'm at in math, and those that database is used to, again, our TBT meetings, our DLT meetings, our BOT meetings, to ensure that we are all in line together. And this is just an example of our intervention plan. So every school has an intervention plan as part of the process. We have our regular instruction, that's our tier 1. So the standards, the 3rd grade standards, 4th grade standards, we know we have to get to because they testing kids regardless. But we also got to fill all the gaps. We look at each child like a glass as if half full or half empty. We want everybody to be full. So our intervention is making sure that we know how to fill each student's cup. And this is an example of our work and how we've attempting to rebound from the pandemic. We were 68% before the pandemic. During the pandemic, went all the way to 27. Last year, we rebounded to 51% in third grade. And we anticipate this year we should be significantly higher because the third graders who took the test last year were first graders when the pandemic hit. So some of them only were in school for 3 to 4 months before they took the test. So this year we solidly believe that we'll do significantly better. So that concludes my report, and I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Donald, for the great work that you're doing, that you and your staff and your board is committed to doing for helping students succeed. It's great to hear things like this that are happening to advance the students and come out of this pandemic, but also to know that some of these strategies were a result of the pandemic and hopefully will stay on and help kids in the future when we don't have to worry about those types of things. If you have any questions for any of the presenters, I just wanted to remind you to please fill out an index card at each of your tables and raise your hand, and one of our staff will collect them, and then we will use them at the Q&A at the end of the presentations. So now I'm going to transition into adult data. First up is an update on adult education enrollment for Aspire programs in Cuyahoga County. There are 4 programs funded by Aspire Ohio through the Ohio Department of Higher Education. It's Ohio Options, which is here at Tri-C, Polaris's Aspire program, Aspire Greater Cleveland through the Cuyahoga County Public Library, and Seeds of Literacy. I told my staff that I've regressed in my technology skills, and so they're going to have to do everything for me from this point on. Here's a comparison of pre-pandemic enrollment to the program year that just ended on June 30th. The national report system identifies 6 levels of educational functioning in adult education. The lower 3 rank adults' language, arts, and math from 0 through the level equal to 5th grade skills. Individuals entering education at these levels usually have long-term plans to advance and prepare to sit for high school equivalency exams. It's usually not achieved in 1 or even 2 years. Reviewing the bar graphs, there are some interesting changes. Prior to the pandemic, the number of students enrolling were primarily in the first 3 levels, equaling 69% of total enrollment. That continued through this past year, but increased to 88% of total enrollment. The total enrolled between fiscal year 19 and 22 was down about 26%, but adults at the 3 highest levels, there was a 71% decrease. This is data for high school equivalencies and the adult diploma for the same time periods. High school equivalency has replaced the term GED. The main reason is that adults are able to choose between the GED exam and the HiSET exam, basically 2 different vendors now. The adult diploma provides adults aged 20 and older with an option to earn an industry-recognized credential aligned to one of the Ohio in-demand jobs and awarded a state-issued high school diploma. Again, comparing the pre-pandemic funding year with the past funding year, there is a 70% decrease in the number of HSE graduates and a 68% decrease in the number of adult diploma graduates. This is similar to the significant decline in the 3 higher educational functioning levels for the Aspire enrollment. What does this tell us? We see that adults at the lower levels are continuing to attend adult education, which is great, but adults at the higher levels are dramatically lower for Aspire, for completing the high school equivalency, or completing the adult diploma programs. Why are they not coming back? Well, we're still figuring that out, but are they finding employment opportunities that do not require the HSE, or are they experiencing more barriers now that are preventing them from attending? We work with our adult education partners to learn about what they're experiencing and how we can provide assistance through professional development or best practices to help them engage the students that need their services. And although we don't have all the answers to these questions yet, we are committed to help finding the answers. Continuing with adults, we wanted to share the new data sets released by PIAC this year. In 2020, the Survey of Adult Skills, also PIAC, released data that provided a snapshot of literacy and numeracy skills for states and counties. This year, they have provided additional breakdowns of that data related to age groups and educational attainment. Before I turn it back over to Alex to present the data, let me give you some background. PIAC is designed to assess adult skills over a broad range of abilities, from simple reading and numeric calculations to complex digital problem solving. This assessment is conducted with adults at all educational attainment levels. The PIAC scale is a continuum and not a dichotomy. Proficiency refers to the competence that involves mastery of a set of abilities along the continuum that ranges from simple to complex information processing tasks. It doesn't put any of the tasks at a grade level, only a proficiency level. When PIAC released the state and county data, they combined the 6 proficiency levels into 3. There is a wide range for 2 of the levels and a short range for the middle. PIAC labeled each of these levels. Level 1 and below are at the lower end of proficiency. Although it does not include anyone that cannot read and write, it would include some with very limited skills. This level is one of the levels with a very wide span and would include varying degrees of proficiency across the range. Level 2 is a very small range and has become the most talked about level. It is termed as near proficient or mid-level proficiency. And level 3 and above is the highest level. At the lowest end of level 3, adults are considered proficient in literacy and numeracy. What makes the middle level so talked about is that most state and county averages fall in this level. For example, Cuyahoga County scores right about in the middle of the level for numeracy and towards the higher end of the level for literacy. It's also important to know how PIAC defines literacy and numeracy. Literacy is understanding, evaluating, using, and engaging with written text to participate in society, to achieve one's goals, and to develop one's knowledge and potential. Numeracy is the ability to assess, use, interpret, and communicate mathematical information and ideas to engage and manage mathematical demands of a range of situations in adult life. Pretty simple, right? Yeah, no big things there. Just kidding. There has been much talk in our community about functional illiteracy, so I wanted to give you the definition of that as well. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, also known as UNESCO, defined this in 1978 and used one-word difference to separate functional literacy from illiteracy. To be functionally literate means you can engage in all those activities in which literacy is required for effective functioning of your group and community, and also for enabling you to continue to use reading, writing, and calculation for your own and the community's development. If you are functionally illiterate, you cannot engage in those activities. PIAC indicates that level 1 and below includes adults that are functionally illiterate. The average scores of adults in our nation, Ohio, and our county average at level 2. And according to PIAC, level 2 does not meet the criteria of functional illiteracy. About the use of definitions. I work with a lot of adult education scholars across the country. Stephen Reeder, who I consider the father of adult education, is a professor emeritus of applied linguistics at Portland State University. He is the author of numerous publications on adult literacy and developed the process for small area estimations that are used for the Cuyahoga County and state data. He always stresses not to paint with a broad brush when it comes to adult literacy. He is cautious not to use terms such as illiteracy because the definition is used subjectively. He also believes that there should be outcomes linked to literacy advancement beyond just employment, but to overall well-being and health or active civic engagement. I think initiatives such as Cleveland Reads that will launch on December 17th is an example of what he wants to see. The goal of the initiative is to have Clevelanders read 1 million books and/or read for 1 million minutes in 2023. This brings everyone together and focuses on the power of reading and not a negative label. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Alex to break down the data a little further.
Hello again. Thank you so much, Lori. So you did the hard part for me. You defined all these levels. So let's just jump right into some of the data here. So with an understanding of what these levels represent, I had the opportunity to explore some of this data when it comes to Cuyahoga County. And what you can see here is about just under half of the county comes in at that level 3, that high level of proficiency, that 46% there. About a fifth come in at level 1. And about, a third of the residents of Cuyahoga County are in that in-between space, that level 2. But fortunately, we can break this data down a little further. And we can look at literacy by age, right? And some trends that we see here, some things that we thought were interesting and a little encouraging, is that the largest concentration of literacy proficiency, that level 3, is between that 25 to 34 and that 35 to 44 range. These are some of our younger workers, and it's encouraging to have a workforce like that in Cuyahoga County. Something that was of concern to us, something that we noticed when looking at this data, is that when you look at the younger folks who are a part of this research, that 16 to 24-year-old range, they have lower levels of high proficiency, that level 3, when compared to the 25 to 44-year-old range, as well as higher levels of that level 1 proficiency. So that's definitely something that jumped out to us as a bit of a concern. But I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get lost in percentages. Sometimes it's helpful to actually put numbers, or at least estimates of numbers, to what those percentages are trying to represent. So looking at, breaking it out by age when it comes to that level 2 proficiency, we're looking at roughly a little over 303,000 residents in Cuyahoga County who are at that level 2 range, with a large concentration of those folks coming from that 55 to 64-year-old age range. Similarly, we can break this down by that level 1 proficiency, and we're looking at under 200,000 residents who are coming in at level 1, again with higher concentrations in the older adults, those older adult age bands. Something else we can do with this data, so we can break it down not only by age, but also by education. And we thought this was particularly important because, especially when we're looking at numbers, when it comes to literacy, we often have to use proxies. We often don't have perfect literacy data, and we'll often use something like education as a proxy. And what this shows is that education is not always a great predictor of literacy and reading proficiency. And just want to highlight here, you have almost a third of respondents with a high school education or equivalency who are coming in at that level 1 proficiency, as well as close to a fifth of respondents, I'm a researcher, residents who are coming in at that level 2 proficiency who have a bachelor's degree or higher. So again, we really just want to make sure we can highlight this to know that education is not always a great proxy when it comes to understanding literacy. So I know the focus here, of course, is on literacy today, but we also wanted just to throw some information up here because it was available and easy to dissect on numeracy. And what we found is in Cuyahoga County, generally the numeracy levels are just a little worse than the literacy levels, and you have almost a perfect split by thirds when it comes to levels 1, 2, and 3 of numeracy in Cuyahoga County. So we can also break this out by age, and despite being a little worse than literacy, it still falls along similar lines amongst the age bands. You have that 25 to 34 and 35 to 44 age bands showing the greatest levels of level 3 proficiency and the lowest levels of level 1 proficiency. And finally, just some more information here. Again, further to the point, numeracy by education levels. Of note here, a little over half of individuals in Cuyahoga County with a high school or high school equivalency, we're still coming in at that level 1 numeracy proficiency. And you've got, 2/3 of folks with a bachelor's degree or higher who are at level 3, but there's still that remaining third, right, who are at the lower levels of numeracy proficiency. So thank you so much for sticking with me. I know it can be hard to just talk through numbers, but I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Just as I am having my my colleague staff at the Literacy Cooperative do all my technology, I think I'm just going to have Alex do all of my graphs and data. The information Alex presented isn't a bleak picture. In fact, it's an opportunity to better understand the levels of literacy and numeracy and the skills and the skills of two adults in the same level may not be the same. As stated earlier, PIAC doesn't equate to grade levels, only proficiency or skill levels. But how do we compare PIAC skill levels to the skill levels required in occupations? The International Standard Classification of Occupations, ISCO, breaks down occupations by skill level. In reviewing the tasks described for each of these occupational skill categories to the tasks described by PIAC for each proficiency level, there are some similarities. A word of caution. I want to make it clear that this comparison of tasks described in the PIAC for each level that I'm about to show you in PIAC for each level to the task described in ISO for occupational categories. I'm comparing task for PIAC to the occupational task described. It does not mean people in these jobs are necessarily at these levels. It means that the tasks described for the job have similarities with the tasks outlined by PIAC. These are the occupational skills category in ISCO. Elementary occupations, semi-skilled white collar, semi-skilled blue collar, and skilled occupations. When reviewing the task descriptions, there is a comparison to be made to PIAC. For example, the tasks at PIAC level 1 and below use terms like read brief text, locate a single piece of information, carry out simple processes like counting and sorting. Tasks described for the skill level of elementary occupations include simple and routine tasks, sorting or assembling goods, and using basic literacy and numeracy. PIAC level 2 tasks include application of 2 or more steps or processes, interpretation of relatively simple data and statistics, and the skill level of semi-skilled tasks are described as ability to read information such as safety instructions, make written reports, and perform simple mathematical calculations. PIAC level 3 and above include tasks that identify, interpret, evaluate 1 or more pieces of information, and may require searching for and integrating information across dense texts. The skill level for skilled occupation tasks include complex technical and practical tasks and the ability to understand written material and prepare factual reports. This is not an absolute science, but we have some perspective when we are trying to think of the skill levels required for different jobs. As we think about adults advancing along a career pathway and how to best prepare them, this illustrates that each advancement in improving their literacy and numeracy can allow them the ability to take on additional tasks in higher level positions. The bottom line is that everyone can benefit from incorporating literacy and numeracy into vocational and on-the-job training. I've been saying this for years. and I will continue to say it. What this data tells us is that individuals at every level of educational attainment, you saw the numbers that Alex showed you, everybody is at different literacy levels no matter what their educational attainment is, could benefit from literacy and numeracy refreshers and supports. The remedy is not complex. I recommend these 3 opportunities. The use of contextualized literacy and numeracy with skills training. Contextualized curriculum weaves literacy and numeracy instruction into sector or occupation-specific training so that workers gain practical job skills while at the same time advance their foundational basic skills. An example would be ruler measurement lessons as part of a manufacturing or construction training program. I interviewed manufacturing managers and HR professionals when I worked as a deputy director of workforce development. The number one barrier of new employees was reading a ruler. According to a report by ProLiteracy, adults are statistically more likely to increase their skills and advance in their careers when job training includes literacy and numeracy skills in the context of and incorporated with job training for specific sectors. Connect adult literacy to workforce and economic development. Adult educators teaching foundational basic skills are great partners to develop contextual lessons and work with skills trainers and employers to customize instruction. There are many successful models of this throughout the country in Washington State, New York, and in Ohio. This idea is to pair foundational skill building with workforce preparation and train for in-demand occupations. It has also been successful for English language learners. Connect contextualized literacy to employer and sector partnerships. Adult education instructors are key to providing workplace literacy and helping workers advance their literacy and numeracy skills. Examples of this are on-site high school equivalency classes for hospital workers in environmental, food service, and patient transport positions, and English language classes in a food processing facility. And speaking of employers and workers, I would like to turn the session over to our next speaker, who I consider a valued colleague and friend, Bishara Addison with the Fund for Our Economic Future. Thank you. There we go.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's really hard to follow those presentations because the data is so fascinating. I'm like furiously scribbling notes like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. So I'm really happy that I have a chance to be here representing the Fund for Economic Future in my capacity as the Director of Job Preparation. And what we're gonna do today is share with you some of our findings on a year-long research analysis that the Fund for Economic Future has conducted. And that analysis is called Where Are the Workers? I'm sure during the pandemic you saw all of these challenges around not being able to find workers. And we kept getting these calls. Where's the workforce? What is happening in the labor market? And we're like, we don't know. And so we decided to go through this process. It started with a scan of national research that spoke to what was happening in the labor market. The idea was to debunk some of the myths that were out there. So, I mean, our process literally was, as staff, going through headlines that we had seen in newspapers and testing them with actual research. And of course, some of the findings won't surprise you. I'll give you one example around individuals not going to work because of benefits. Well, it turns out that most workers, that was not a reason why individuals weren't returning to work. And the individuals who indicated that they that were actually relying on benefits to stay home, their incomes were over $70,000. So that is a different population than many of us who work in the social service sector. So the Fund for Economic Future, and the reason why we're able to pull this kind of research together, is that we're a civic collaborative that focuses really on what matters. And the idea behind our organization is that we are a pooled fund of philanthropy and organizations who are willing to make a very nice membership contribution to the Fund for Economic Future. And we utilize that as a creative space where we can work on tough issues as it relates to economic development. And our vision is that we are going to grow the Northeast Ohio economy by creating good jobs and also rising incomes for all, regardless of race or place. And that is a huge emphasis for us at the fund. And we do that in a couple of ways. We develop tools and analysis, such as the Where the Workers research that I'm going to share with you today, our civic network that is a combination of different kinds of organizations, and then we test ideas. And right now we're embarking on what does it look like for us to draw insights from the Where the Workers research, and what do we do with that information, and how do we support our community in utilizing it. So let's get into Where are the Workers. One of the important things about this research is that after we did this national scan, we did an employer survey and followed that with focus groups. And then we also conducted, and this is probably what's most interesting and what I'll share with you today, is a working age adult survey. We hired a public polling firm, and we asked them to call nearly 5,000 residents. And that's really important because there's statistical significance with 5,000 for Northeast Ohio. It allows us to generalize findings, and so you'll see some of our numbers that are based on the statistical significance and that we're able to draw estimates from. And this is a huge endeavor. So if you call 5,000 people and they all answer the phone, great, you're done. But we're paying you for 5,000 people, and so we know that that does not happen. And so you have to call 25,000 to land 5,000, then that's what we're paying you for. And so it's a huge lift, and we have a ridiculous amount of data. I can't share all of it with you today because Lori will kick me off the stage. But I will have a sampling of data that I think is interesting for this audience. All right, so we've already talked about the 5,000 adults, and that means that nearly this 5,000 number represents close to 3 million people in Northeast Ohio. So this is Northeast Ohio data, even though I do have some Cuyahoga County specific data. Over 600 employers filled out the survey, and then we also had 350 employers participate in focus groups. That was led by Team NEO. So just to give you some overall findings, not of which will surprise you, but this is just a sampling of our overall headings. The first is that if the labor market feels tight, it's because it is. There really are less workers in our labor market than there were before. One of the things we found that a lot of folks were retiring earlier than expected. And then there's also roughly 2 jobs for every 1 person, which means that this is a workers' market. That allows us to be able to negotiate because you have choices that you may not have had before. Think in the recession, usually that number's reversed. The second is that a lot of individuals were laid off and lost their jobs during the pandemic, nearly 630,000. Of those workers who are working, we found that folks are more stressed, that they are feeling more stressed than they were before. And this is important because our survey really looked at, or asked questions rather, of what was your beliefs and attitudes about the workforce. So this isn't saying that we aren't analyzing your how many times you went to the doctor. We're asking about individuals' perceptions across the region. We know that a lot of folks decided to change their plans during the pandemic. We had one focus group participant that said this was the first time in their career they had a chance to pause and think about what they really wanted to do with their lives. And that was a focus group for a participant from Cuyahoga County. We also know that more people are working remotely relative to the number of individuals that were working remotely before, and that actually folks have a preference for working remotely. So when we look at like a pie chart of those who work fully from home to those who are working fully in the office, it's actually pretty much an even split. When we looked at construction specific data, those who worked in the construction industry, most of those workers said that they preferred to work in the office, which we're assuming means that you prefer to work on site. But if you look at some of the other industries, you have individuals who said, I have a strong preference from working from home. So there's actually an even split, but it's more individuals taking advantage of working from home than before. Also, new working arrangements. Regardless of employment status, there are more folks that are doing freelance work, contract-based work, or gig work. And so when we think of gig, specifically, we're thinking of app-based work, but we know contract and part-time work can include other things as well. And that folks are working multiple jobs. Folks were working multiple jobs before the pandemic, but now they are creating earned income opportunities that have a different structure than maybe before. So it's no longer, I have to find one full-time job. They are finding multiple ways in which they are assembling income. Also, racial diversity since 2001, if we look from 2001 to 2021, racial diversity in our regional labor market has greatly increased, which I think is a good thing. But if we were to call out who is making up more and more of the workforce, it's Gen Z and millennials. And it's from a workforce perspective. Everyone asks me, how do we deal with these Gen Z and millennials? And I'm like, well, as an older millennial, I like flexibility. So you might want to think about that. So for the purposes of today, because if we went through everything, we wouldn't have time, we did a special analysis for 3 subgroups that we thought would be of interest to all of you, since I know many of you work with young adults. You're also working women with children, so I'm thinking the Literacy Cooperative has done a lot of work around not just 2Gen, but also really working with parents who have children in childcare, and then also those with a high school diploma or less. So those findings that I'm getting ready to show you are specific to that. So a closer look with Gen Z, that's for us means 18 to 24. And to no surprise, there's more part-time and gig work happening with this demographic. They are less satisfied with work, which goes along with a lot of folks saying that we're lazy or we demand too much. And I'm like, yes, we do. And they also would like support for training. If we were to look at all the different subgroups that we've analyzed beyond just the ones that I'm showing today, of the folks who engaged in gig work, this particular age bracket engaged in gig work more relative to the overall sample and other subgroups as well. So just looking at employment, we find that there are more Gen Z individuals working in a number of different work arrangements. And one of the things that I think just stands out to me is not only are they more likely to be in part-time employment or in unstable employment. And that's why you see in this kind of pie graph that they're kind of all over the place. And so just so you know, the smaller pie graph is the overall sample, and the smaller graph is just Gen Z. Feelings about work. What we find is that they are less satisfied with their current work situation. They don't make enough to make ends meet relative to the overall sample, and they don't feel like they get paid well enough. But that actually makes sense. So if you think about the type of jobs that they're more likely to be in, these are jobs that usually are frontline jobs. You might be in your first job and definitely have a different wage. They are having trouble finding and keeping employment. They do have stress at work and more likely to call in sick due to burnout. So I feel like of the groups that we've analyzed, this is the most unstable group as it relates to the labor market relative to other subgroups. In terms of training and digital access, even though a lot of folks said that they need more training, they were also less aware of available training, but they were more likely, relative to the other subgroups I'll talk about today, to have internet access at home. And I just have a feeling that this is just generationally, young adults are just more comfortable with internet access relative to other age brackets. So women with children under 5. To no surprise, again, not telling you anything that shocks you, hopefully this data just validates some of your existing assumptions, is that they are more likely to report having a hard time finding employment and keeping work, and they also have increased stress. Well, of course, we know that the pandemic was stressful, and then if you have children under 5, well, that's stressful all by itself. And so when it comes to women with children under 5, more women were likely to say that they were participating in gig work than before, even though still not as high rates as Gen Z. And they were more likely to work full-time employment at higher rates relative to other subgroups. And I have a feeling that has to do with, for many women, particularly if we work in social services or we're working with individuals who are under the poverty line, if you're accessing benefits in the state of Ohio, we have work requirements. And so actually they might be in a position where they have to work, but just because you have to work or are in a job doesn't mean you're in a good job. So that's a key point. And another interesting finding is that not only are they, some of them are unemployed, and so when we look at this particular chart, we have unemployed, but that also means that you could be looking, so you're being counted in unemployment data. But then we also ask the question, are you employed and not looking? And we find that relative to other groups, they still are more likely to be looking for employment relative to those who are unemployed but not looking. And so this is a relative comparison, of course, to other subgroups. In terms of feelings about work, again, you're going to see some of the same trends of not necessarily being satisfied compared to the overall sample, not making enough to make ends meet. And one of the things that really high rates, and so this, of the subgroups, the highest rate of stress at work was actually with women with children under 5. In terms of training and digital access, this is actually a group that is very or somewhat more likely to seek training. And one of the discussions I had with the folks that helped us analyze this data is just like, why is that? They're more likely to seek training, and you've got children in the home, and part of it has to do with, which is, this would be for deeper analysis on our end, is what is the age group of the women with children under 5? They probably, I mean, imagine if you're younger, you may have less education, you may have just graduated from high school or just graduated from college, and so actually when it comes from an upward mobility track, you're probably more ready or thinking about seeking more training. So then we get into, and this hopefully aligns up with some of the data that our earlier presenters have showed, is those with a high school diploma or less. And so we look at both those with a high school diploma and then also those who do not have a high school diploma. And overall, they're more likely to have less stable employment relative to other groups. So those with a high school diploma, we're finding that they're also engaging in gig and contract work, so that's to no surprise. But they are also struggling with being able to find stable employment. So only 29% of those with a high school diploma relative to the overall sample were engaged in full-time employment, whereas of the overall population, it's a bit greater. Those with the no high school diploma, for instance, we found that they were more likely to not be employed and also not looking. But one of the key things that stood out to me was that relative to other populations, they were more likely to be laid off or furloughed. And from a workforce perspective, that makes me think about dislocated worker funding in the Workforce Development Board. So is there an opportunity to capture this audience and knowing that there's some dedicated resources to be able to support them? In terms of feelings about work, and this bar chart looks a little different than the other ones. The super light green is the overall sample. The slightly darker green is really looking at those with a high school diploma, and those with the dark green, are those that do not have a high school diploma. And so there's some really interesting data points here where we were really surprised, where individuals said that those that were working were satisfied with their current work situation, but that's what the data says. But one of the things that we did see across the groups was it was difficult to find and keep employment in the past year for those who were not employed. And that might have to do with if you don't have the kinds of skill levels that Lori was describing earlier, then it's harder to find the jobs that match your skill set. In terms of training and digital access, obviously those with no high school diploma, so this shouldn't surprise you if you work in this field, is that they lack access to the internet. They are more likely to know and be aware of available training. And so I think that's a kudos to the folks that are doing this work in the community, because this was higher relative to other smaller subgroups, that they are more aware, which means either you're doing a really good job of getting the word out, or individuals are really interested in taking advantage of your services. So obviously we saw from some of the data that Lori was sharing that we were seeing less enrollment in some of the Aspire programs, but you're actually doing better relative to other subgroups. So I think that that's a really good thing. So that's something to celebrate. So here we get into data that we just pulled for this group. And so this is like super fresh. And so, forgive our analysis because we were making this ourselves instead of having our consultants do it. So you're gonna see some heat maps that I think are really important because it speaks to digital access and also your confidence and comfort using technology. So this first heat map really looks at the average comfort and scale of using a computer. So if you're in the dark red, then you are not comfortable at all. If you are dark green, then you're super comfortable. And we find that people are actually pretty comfortable using a computer according to our survey sample. And particularly because I'm always interested in Cuyahoga County and Cleveland, that I thought that was telling. So if we look at just Cuyahoga County, and if you see where there's yellow and the kind of lighter green, that's really kind of the east side of Cleveland suburbs. And so again, it seems like there is relatively comfort using a computer or using a digital tool. So I thought that those were good findings. Those are surprisingly good results. So now we get into where it's not surprising, but not so great. In terms of respondents that have access to the internet. So if you're looking at red, that means that there's less access to the internet. And if you're looking at the dark green, that means there's more access to the internet. And so you'll see that there's, the Cuyahoga County is a bit more colorful, but even across the region, we clearly have some digital access deserts. There are areas that do not have strong broadband. So it's not just our local community, but I think we have a problem. If we look just at Cuyahoga County, though, notice that really, in this, if you were to look at this, this particular heat map, the dark red and the orange is concentrated really on east side suburbs, east side neighborhoods of Cleveland, and then there's two that didn't quite surprise me. Ohio City does not fare well in terms of having strong broadband or internet access, and East Cleveland. So when we're looking at where the biggest challenge is, where we might want to put resources in making sure that people have internet access, it really is East Side Cleveland suburbs, East Side Cleveland neighborhoods and the surrounding suburbs. So another one is internet access via smartphone only. And this is important because this speaks to devices. So do you have a computer or a device in your home, or are you primarily using the internet via your phone? So of course, if you are in the green, that means that you are likely to have a device. So that means in terms of smartphone access, you probably have a smartphone, but you have something else. If you're in the red, and so as the colors change, it means that you are more likely to only have a smartphone to use the internet. And if you were to overlay these heat maps, again, it's some of the same neighborhoods that seem to struggle more with only having a smartphone and not having other devices in the home. So when we think about where can we improve or where can we make investments, it's gonna look at the same neighborhoods where it's really east side neighborhoods of Cleveland, you have east side suburbs, and then we're looking at Ohio City and East Cleveland. Those are the areas where smartphone use only is higher relative to having other devices. And so that is, those are the findings that we found that we thought would be most interesting. If I were to kind of give you some insights and just where we think that there are opportunities for improvement, The first is keep doing what you're doing as it relates to getting the word out, because it seems like as it relates to a subgroup that really struggles with high school attainment, you're actually doing pretty well with adults in getting the word out relative to other subgroups. So that doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, but it means that you're doing better relative to other organizations or communities that have other subgroups as their primary stakeholder. Where we see the challenges, though, is clearly there is unstable employment for individuals who do not have a high school diploma or high school diploma only. And there's probably issues, particularly with women and children, with stress and satisfaction at work. So from a workforce development perspective, we would think, hey, we probably need to do more work around how do we provide holistic wraparound services for women with children under 5, because we've got to ease that pressure. With those that are lacking some high school diploma or needing more resources, particularly 18 to 24, what we want to do is make sure that those groups are more aware of training. But overall, across sample sizes, across different subgroups, people do want more training, which says to me that they want folks to invest in their upward mobility. And so we have to not only continue doing that, we have to make sure people are aware, and we have to find ways to be able to make that work for working adults, because if you saw the survey data, quite a few people are working full-time employment either because this is a good market for workers right now, because they have to. If you have children, you have to. You might be on benefits that require you to. And then the last thing is that we do have to work on job quality, because just because you're in a frontline position that maybe makes a lower wage doesn't mean you don't deserve to work in a good job. And we know that sometimes someone who is struggling with literacy and numeracy, their first job should be a job that makes them want to do more and grow. And so we want to make sure that their first experience is a good one. And that's all from me.
Wow. A lot of stuff. I don't know about you, if your eyes are rolling in the back of your head here listening to all this, it's just a lot of data to try to synthesize and think through. So I appreciate all of you being here and your patience. We have several questions here, and we have a mic at the table there. I have a couple for Donald Jolly. Congratulations on your work with students. What work has been done with families to get their support and input on your work with the students?
So with families, that's a work in progress. Again, we have a lot of young families. A lot of the data that was provided are some of our struggles. We recently hired some family engagement coordinators for all 3 of our schools. Again, we work closely with our library, and we work with the YMCA to try to capture that group, but that is a work in progress. All the data, we have a lot of young families. We have over 4,000 apartment units in our community. So we have a lot of transient young people who are underemployed, who have a lot of those challenges. So those are things that we're working toward.
Thank you. Dr. Again, how long do you think kids most impacted by COVID will continue to stay behind?
I think it's determined by the effort of the people who are entrusted to teach them. I believe kids are very resilient and they learn fast, but you have to be consistent with the work. I think we've seen kids catch up in 2-3 months. It's just the consistency of what we do. A lot of times people do things one-off and they don't do it every day. And I think that if the consistency and commitment and dedication is there, it can happen faster. I don't think there's a prescribed time frame. It's individual, but it's the commitment and dedication of the people who are doing the work.
Thank you. To that regard, with some of the interventions that you put in place during the pandemic and also some of the staff positions you've added, will those remain in place, some of those interventions and the staffing?
The interventions are here forever. The staff, we are figuring out how to keep those staff members. So we're figuring out creative ways to do it.
Okay. Are there PD sessions going on with some of your preschool level teachers around the science of reading?
Yes, it's constant. Our preschool is part of our K-3 unit, It's constant we have PD twice a month in our schools. That's part of our schedule. So twice a month we have PD after school. And our pre-K has 2 Fridays a month, which they do professional development. So it's an ongoing process.
Okay. One more for you.
No problem. No problem.
The data shown here is not only alarming, but it's information that shows how much work we have to do. My question will be to Superintendent Jolly regarding Warrensville and address literacy concerns. Mr. Jolly, what were the top 3 areas that focused on to help bring some change that was a need to improve literacy in the schools?
Well, I think you have to have everybody on one accord. Division hurts students. So you have to have your union, you have to have your Board of Education, the whole community on board to understand that this is important. And then the resources have to be allocated. You need people and you need resources. A lot of times people have initiatives without the people or the resources. So the allocation of people and the resources. And then you need the data. And you gotta have constant and current and constant data so that you can make the adjustments necessary. So first is the belief system that all kids deserve to know how to read, all kids deserve the opportunity to read. It's investing in helping the people who are teaching them how to read to have the skill set that they need, and also ongoing helping them continue to grow. And then the last is just having the resources available to keep it consistent. A lot of times things happen. Again, I go back to the inconsistency of programs, the inconsistency of staffing, the inconsistency of a lot of things which hinder that whole process of teaching students how to read. So I think in our community we have a blessing of having people who all value the students, who all believe that all students deserve those opportunities, and are willing to invest the resources, not just short-term but long-term, to ensure student success.
Great. How could the community help support the work that the school is doing?
Well, I think the community can support, like for us, levies are crucial, but our community like to see results from levies. So we can't just get the money and not show results. But I believe the results, I believe volunteering also is very crucial. The more people in the schools helping students to read, also being present. Students, and especially students who come from our type of environment that Warrensville has, is that they need to see people who are professionals, who come back and give back, who reach back and pull up our young people. And that's very important because a lot of young people have not seen a lot of professional people. They haven't interacted with people of high quality, I want to say high quality, but profession, who accomplished. The impact of just an interaction and a relationship goes a long way, even with a kindergartner or first grader. And sitting down and having them read to you can inspire students. So I think the community is just it's not money, it's time, it's effort, and it's commitment, not just coming one time, but being consistent and building those relationships.
Great, thank you. Lori, I think this one is for you. How does Cuyahoga County compare as far as the survey of adult skills and PIAC numbers are concerned with surrounding areas and the nation?
We are one of for Northeast Ohio, our level 3 proficiency is at the lowest of all of them. I think it's Lake County that is a little bit higher. But we are not far behind the nation at all. We are not far behind the state. When you are in an area that has a large urban area, you are going to see that the numbers are going to be a little bit different just because of the concentration, the higher number of individuals. But we have work to do to be number 1, but we're not far behind on there. If you go to the Literacy Cooperative's website, we have a lot of graphics that show Northeast Ohio, and it also shows some neighboring cities, neighboring states with the county data and how we are looking, as compared to that. But we have work to do, but we are not at the lowest level by far.
And do we have plot maps for the county? So one regard, the areas that have the greatest deficits in the city of Cleveland, or can we identify where in the county are the greatest areas of concern around the PIAC?
They do not have the city data broken down. It is county data, so we could take a stab at it, but it wouldn't be a PIAC sanctioned information. I will say, though, that the PIAC survey has been done in 2012, 14, and 17, and they just launched the next round of it. And every time they're able to gather more data, they're able to break it down even more. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years that we don't see PIAC coming out with the city data, going city by city, because they're at the county level now. So I think this one additional series may give them enough information that they can break it down by city.
And I think we could take a pretty good guess on where those areas of greatest need are. If you look at kindergarten readiness scores, the deficit that is apparent for adults didn't just happen when they became adults. Those deficits were there early on when they entered kindergarten and before. So we can look at some of the areas where the kindergarten readiness assessment scores are the worst and guess that's where the adult literacy challenges are going to be. One of the questions you just answered about when the PIAC was completed. So it was interesting. It was completed before the pandemic. Yet one of those areas that Alex showed was of great concern was that 16 to 24 had higher levels of low literacy, and that was before the pandemic. So, I have a bad sense that the numbers are even worse. A question about what investments are going into the initiative around the Cleveland Reading Program with the $1 million. And I know we have it's being led by the Cleveland Public Library, and there are going to be community ambassadors who are going to be working, encouraging adults and families to put their information into the system that the Cleveland Public Library will be using to track how many books are being read and how many minutes people are devoted to reading. There are a number of there's a kickoff campaign that is happening December 17th, and a number of other things that will be scheduled throughout the year to encourage people and families to read together. Can students enrolled in private schools acquire books from Imagination Library? The answer is yes. Every single child in Cuyahoga County who's under the age of 5 is eligible. It's free to families. There is no cost to a family to participate in this program. In fact, it's available to every child in the state of Ohio. Due to the hard work of Governor DeWine and First Lady DeWine, it is available to every child in the state of Ohio. And in fact, they are just celebrating that they have more than 50% of the children under the age of 5 in the state of Ohio is currently enrolled and receiving books through Imagination Library. And we in Cuyahoga County are just under the 50%, so we have work to do. We have 35,000 children enrolled today, and that represents just under about 47% of all the children under the age of 5 in Cuyahoga County. So we continue to need all of your help to make families aware of this program. How many books are published in other accessible formats? If we're talking about Imagination Library, there are at least 2 books for each grade level or each age level that are bilingual in Spanish. And I know through I think it's the National Association of the Blind, they can get Braille books. National Printing House, they can get books in Braille. Did that answer your question?
Kind of, but yes.
Okay.
I wanted to focus more on the larger print and the color contrast and the Braille.
I don't know that in Imagination Library they have large print books at this point. They're always looking at making the books more accessible and for people to access. And I think this one is from you as well around virtual internship program. Okay, our international virtual internship program for persons with disabilities. One large barrier is accessibility for digital sites and content. How will this barrier be addressed within the literacy and employment programs in the future? Anyone got a sense on that one?
Repeat that, I didn't. So basically, I was asking how is accessibility to the digital content being addressed? Because right now it's very accessible.
I mean, I think that it is a very good question, and it's something that we should be asking and trying to find out what we can do differently. I'm sure there are some things in place. I think people have, are working to do what they can for it. But I think that's a very good thing to bring to our attention.
A big part of the disability is not being able to get to the content, and many of my interns and school leaders, they can't use the sites.
Okay. That's a good point, and I will say that I just, this week, I had a meeting with the Cuyahoga County Department of Disability about some professional development sessions they would like to do in the adult education community to really bring people up to speed with what's needed. And so there is going to be funding available in 2023 to do just that. So that's a piece. I know it's not everything, but it's a start.
What opportunity exists for parents to support their children with literacy? And can they be trained in the science of reading? I know within our wonderful library systems we have here in Cuyahoga County, they have many programs for parents to take their children into to learn about some of those activities that they can be doing to boost their children's education and literacy. There's a family engagement program that's going to be happening through the libraries also that we'll be hearing more about, that families are welcome to come in to help, again, help their children learn with that, support their education and learning. Well, thank you. I appreciate all of you being here and sticking with this for our entire session. Please share your thoughts when you complete the survey on this session, but also any other thoughts on how we as a community might be able to address some of the challenges and opportunities that we talked about here today. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful holiday.